Ooh, we're live. That was my mistake. And we're going to go live on Facebook Live. And hello to all of you who are waiting, because I am too early. I hit the wrong button. So give us a moment to go live on Facebook Live, and we will get started at the top of the hour. I'm Russell Rivera, getting ready to start episode 10 of Discuss with Russ, and we just had a little glitch and started a little early. So welcome. And thanks for joining us. Again, we're going to start at the top of the hour and let a couple of other people get in here. And we're now going to be live on Facebook as well. So, Adam, I guess we're kind of hanging out a little bit. What's been going on with you?
Everything's been great, as best as it can be under quarantine. Got a little sun today. So,
Good.
you know, office
Good.
outside is not too bad.
All right. Well, you know, we got a couple of minutes till we get started. And of course, I and this is all my fault because I obviously hit the wrong button. So hello to Lori, who's joined us a little bit early. As we go through the show, Lori, if you have questions, use the Q&A tab and make sure that we're ready. You know, as need be, we'll be able to answer your questions. So just wanted to let you know that, and we'll mention that again in a couple of times throughout the show. So thank you again for joining us. I appreciate it. So just give us 2 minutes and we'll start at the top of the hour and go from there. And the best part is this is being recorded. So if there is an issue with this, I will be able to send out the recording after the fact, or you can view it on our webpage. And again, we are live. Adam, I don't know if you need to share what we're doing on Facebook, but you can do that as well.
Right.
It's actually through the Voice Wealth Management Facebook page.
Perfect.
Okay, so take a minute to do that, and we'll get set with our live read and are starting a little bit early here on episode 10 with Discuss with Russ. We'll be ready to go in 1 minute. And it was good of me to hit the broadcast button a little bit early today. So. This is how the sausage gets made. And usually we give people an extra minute or two, but we're going to start right as close to the top of the hour as possible, just because, hey, we hit the button. And so we are currently live. Thankfully for the recorded version, we will be able to edit this out. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll start in just a few seconds. All right. And good afternoon, and welcome to Discuss with Russ. I'm Russell Rivera, founder and president of Voice Wealth Management, and my guest this afternoon is Adam Citron of Davidoff, Hutcher Citron, LLP. This is episode 10 of Discuss with Russ. Our topic this afternoon is how COVID-19 is causing and dealing with family and relationship issues. For those of you tuning in today for the first time, the Discuss with Russ series is focused on helping you get through the crisis and start thinking and planning for what the world might look like as the crisis dissipates. Now that we can leave our homes and see each other face to face again, we want to help you anticipate possible responses in society's behavior so you can be most prepared to succeed. My firm, Voice Wealth Management, primarily works with entrepreneurs, young professionals, and their families to help them get the most out of their money. While I'm a chartered financial analyst and certified financial planner, Many also see me as their personal CFO and financial therapist. Yes, that's in quotes, recognizing the psychological power of money in addition to using short-term and long-term planning to help you get the most out of every dollar you earn and use. And of course, joining us this afternoon is Adam Citron. Adam is a partner in his firm's matrimonial and family law practice areas and has spent most of the last decade representing high-profile and high-net-worth clients in divorce and family-related matters. Prior to joining the firm in January of 2013, Adam served as an assistant district attorney in Westchester County. In his role as an ADA, he has argued before the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court and conducted numerous non-jury and jury trials in the New York State trial courts. As for housekeeping issues, there is a Q&A tab for asking questions. Please use that. Please don't use the chat. And the web show is being recorded, so we will tell you how to get a recording at the end of the program. And with that, Adam, welcome and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Russ. Good being on.
So I want to take us back to the beginning of the year. Based on my research, incidences of divorce and family actions have been declining. In your industry, have you been seeing a general trend of more couples staying together?
Well, in fact, we have, Russ. For example, the divorce rate has declined in recent years. In large part, that's been driven by millennials. Millennials have been getting married at an older age as compared to the baby boomer generation, which married younger, divorced quite quickly, and remarried. Millennials tend to develop into adults prior to marriage. By waiting those extra years, they really mature and turn into, the person they're going to be for the remainder of their lives, as compared to people that get married young and have not fully formulated their adult demeanor and realize at somewhat of an early stage in their early 30s that, they've grown away or grown apart from or have different divergent interests than the person they ended up marrying at a young age. Just for some statistics, there's been an 18% decline from 2008 to 2016. So that's pretty significant. Further, in 2018, there were 2.8 divorces per 1,000 inhabitants in New York as compared to 3.2 per 1,000 in 1990. So again, a pretty large decline. Believe it or not, the better gauge to look at is women over the age of 15. And yes, I said 15. Believe it or not, people get married at a very young age around the country. That gauge, however, states that 5.7 per 1,000 in New York is the average. And that's really what the professionals go by. We're below the national average of 7.7. And when I say we, I mean New York State. So we're actually under the national average for divorces. And we actually rank 47th. So we're pretty much a marrying state, or a state that stays married. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, continue, sorry.
One factor, or I should say two factors that are not, have not been gauged as of yet are same-sex marriages. In the last several years, many states across the country have adopted legalized same-sex marriages. So those figures have not come to fruition, I'll say. So we don't know whether or not that will increase or decrease the divorce rate. So that's to be seen. In addition, more 60-plus-year-olds are getting divorced. With people living longer, having healthier lives, older people are now starting to get divorced. They realize the kids are out of the house. They've got another 30, maybe 40 years left to go. And if they're unhappy, it's time for a new start. So again, that's another somewhat new factor that in the coming years will be factored into the divorce rate.
So longevity, that's interesting, because obviously as people make plans, if you were 60, you were thinking about retiring and with life expectancies, around 70 years old for men and maybe 77 for women like they were decades ago. That would be a tough time to make a new start, but it does make sense with people living longer, healthier lives, that a new start at 60 isn't that crazy, especially if they're going to live for a long time in retirement.
And on that note, while this isn't necessarily COVID related, what's interesting is we're now seeing 65-year-olds who want to A, retire, and B, divorce their wives. And normally in a long-term marriage, you're paying maintenance on present income for half of the marriage. If it was a 30-year marriage, you're going to be paying 15. But the courts have to realize that you can't force a 65-year-old who intended to retire to work for the next 15 years in order to pay those supports. So that's a new novel issue that the courts have been grappling.
That's interesting, and you're right. That's like a new case of law to kind of deal with. I understand, and we'll see how the courts bear that out. So, before the shutdown, what would you say the biggest cause of divorce was?
I would say the biggest cause of divorce was monetary issues. Obviously, financial strain in a relationship is a stressor. Normally, during the good times, partners are more willing to kind of turn a blind eye to certain issues, kind of go along with the flow. However, when the money runs up, they're less receptive to deal with those issues and see less of a downside of making a clean break. So monetary issues are definitely one factor. Additionally, as people are marrying older, having children older, we're seeing a lot of 35 to 40-year-olds now having children, 40-plus-year-old having children with IVF and the like. So we're seeing an uptick in children with autism and other special needs. That obviously is a very significant stressor on the marriage. I see a lot of cases in which one parent is hypersensitive to the child's needs while the other may be in denial. So when you have conflicting views, that again is a stressor compiled with having a special needs child, and then the divergent views about it and how to handle it are huge stressors. So I'm seeing a lot of divorces with parents with special needs children. Obviously, drugs and alcohol cause divorce, obviously, and it's been in the news that there's been an uptick in alcohol consumption and drug consumption because of COVID and the stresses involved with the health issues, the financial issues, being stuck at home. So that's another one. Infidelity, of course, is a factor. And then again, people who marry young and grow apart because, again, they haven't fully matured before they got married. So those are the main causes of divorce.
And there is something you mentioned, or at least to me failed to mention, and at least I want to ask later on if we don't touch on it in another way, that I think is important to ask about, especially related to our current situation. So while we're emerging from, lockdown, quarantine, whatever it is you want to call it, what are your biggest concerns for relationships that were already rocky, maybe heading into quarantine? How might something like this push them over the edge?
Okay. Well, normally when you're not in quarantine, you have outlets, meaning you've got work. You can go to the gym. You can play sports. You're not around that person 24/7. So obviously people with a fragile relationship that may have certain issues have releases. Under quarantine, you don't have those releases. So what was once a pet peeve has become a major issue. You can't get away from it. You can't distract yourself from it. Obviously, the financial stresses of, is my pay being cut? Will I have a job when this ends? Again, those are stressors that affect a relationship. You're less willing to take something, off the chin or off the cuff. So again, those are issues that exacerbate a bad relationship. And if there are issues, again, they're exacerbated. So.
And one of the other issues I guess I've heard about being exacerbated and people concerned about is domestic violence issues, and I guess maybe that, or even child abuse issues. How are you aware if those have been accelerated or might affect divorces as we start to emerge and things happen?
Right. Well, obviously there's an increase in alcohol. Alcohol causes domestic violence, or is it causing domestic violence? The one positive is that the courts have stayed open, the family courts have stayed open with respect to exigent circumstances, meaning abuse of a child, neglect of a child, abuse of a spouse. And that's pretty much the only exigent circumstance, at least in the realm of family family matters, that the courts have been staying open. Again, the fact that they say they're open, it's been very difficult under those circumstances, even with those exigent circumstances, to get before a judge. There's a lot of delay. You're dealing with a lot of bureaucracy with the clerk's office, but the courts do recognize the import of that. So that is the only real exigent circumstance that people have been able to get before a judge.
So yeah, and that kind of it dovetails a little bit into the next question. One of the issues I've been concerned about, and I'm unsure about, obviously, in this age of social distancing that we're still in, but obviously it's more relaxed. How divorced parents are managing custody arrangements. So have you had to get involved in these issues at all? What's your range of experience like on this over the last few months?
So over the last few months, even with the courts closed, for the most part, we've been dealing with emergencies, dealing with our clients and custody arrangements, whether it be during a divorce, post-judgment. I have noticed that the first few weeks or so, people were really understanding of the situation, putting their child's interest first. People believed that this would be a short-term situation, which is now, as we all know, has gone on for months. So they really worked together to make an arrangement. Some clients have had virtual visits rather than physical visits, understanding that the children, the safety of the children and transporting them long distances and using the subway and whatnot was not the best idea. As this pandemic has gone on and the stay-at-home order has continued, we're seeing more fatigue, more of an uproar or more of a demand to see the children, to commence in-person visits and the like. Just to give you a couple examples, and I should say this, a lot of parents have done the right thing, worked together, co-parented, and put the child's best interest at the forefront. However, other litigants have use this as an opportunity to alienate the child from the other parent, to interfere with the parental rights and the like. And Judge Sunshine, who is the administrative judge for Brooklyn, but more importantly is the chair to the state administrative judge, Judge DeFiore's Matrimonial Practice Advisory and Rule Committee, came out with a opinion letter basically saying that while we understand that the courts are closed now, and that you do not have the relief or the help of the courts will be watching, and they will, at a later point, see how you handled the situation. Because some adults or some parents have, again, alienated the other or used this as an excuse to interfere with their parental rights. Other clients have, or not clients, but other parties have used self-help. For example, I had a client that very wealthy family. They have a home in Florida, or I should say they're not married any longer. She has a home in Florida. The husband agreed to allow the ex-wife to go to Florida with the children. He came to Florida in April. He saw the children in April for extended periods of time. Everything was fine, but as this dragged on, he wanted to come back to New York. They're New York residents. He has a home on Shelter Island. So what he did was, of all days, Mother's Day, took the children, put them on a private plane, and flew them back to New York. Now, the problem there was these are two New York residents. The kids wanted to be in New York. The kids always were in the Hamptons during the summer. The mother also had a home in the Hamptons. And I represented the mother. The mother was scared for the children to be in New York, which I understand. However, you're dealing with two New York residents who always spent the summers in the Hamptons, and my belief is that no New York judge is going to say that New York, Shelter Island, is unsafe for a child as compared to Florida. It's political suicide, and in all practicality, the children are, for the most part, safe staying on Shelter Island. So
Yeah,
that's
and that,
really,
that brings up all sorts of other questions, right? Now with Florida spiking, and what are those conditions that determine actual safety in terms of the virus? And again, why does a family court judge, or why would a family court judge make that determination on their own?
right. So again, it's very difficult to delineate, is Florida more safe or is New York safe? And again, from a political standpoint, no judge is going to go out on a limb and say New York is an unsafe state. But you're right. And a lot of it's subjective. A lot of it is how the parents manage the safety. You could be in the most safe place, but if you don't take the proper precautions as a parent, it could be more dangerous than being in the epicenter in Queens. So it's very subjective. Another note is some parents have not taken their best interest of the child into consideration. I had one client who was going through a relocation proceeding before the epidemic, and in that relocation proceeding, she was moving to Virginia to be with her new husband, who did national security work, could only work in Virginia. So she was in the middle of a trial when this hit, and the trial was obviously adjourned. Now, the children had the opportunity to be in Virginia, to be in a home, to have a backyard, and the husband, who was in New York at the time, or the ex-husband, I should say, refused to allow the children to miss a single visit. So as a result, and because the ex-wife was fearful of what would happen at the trial if she restricted her access even for a weekend, brought the children back to New York City. So again, that was a father who technically under the law was right. However, he put his own interest over his children's interest, and I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the animosity between him and his ex-wife. Again, though, the mother felt that the best interest was to keep the children in Virginia, but was worried about repercussions once the courts opened back up. So she took the more cautious and prudent method, which is the complete polar opposite of the father who put the kids on a private jet and flew them to New York.
And sure, right, every action that a parent takes in that case is evidence that they can be, can be used by the judge to determine appropriate actions going forward, whatever that looks like in the judge's point of view, right?
Correct.
So we've, as we discussed with some other lawyers on this program, a lot of legal actions have been unable to begin. So even things like filing wills or powers of attorney. Well, powers of attorney, not so much, but other those types of actions have been delayed because they're not necessarily exigent. While others, like I said, that were in process have had to pause. So what do things look like in some of your cases in terms of where they are in the process? How are they paused? How has the court system told you that that new filings can begin, how new act or current and continuing actions can resume?
Right. Well, I will say this. The one positive to the pandemic is that the court system was very antiquated. It really wasn't computerized, especially in the matrimonial department. So in the matrimonial department, for the most part, other than one or two judges in the state, not in the state, but in the tri-state area, did not do what's called e-file. E-file is an electric filing system which basically uploads and you scan all of your documents. It's done via computer. Matrimonial, because they're privileged matters, required consent, even in those limited circumstances for e-filing. But for the most part, it was a paper court, meaning you would go into the courthouse, you would file your papers, you would serve them either personally or on the attorney via paper. So this pandemic has caused not only the court system in general to more update their systems, whether it be through virtual conferences or allowing more types of e-filing, but it has transformed the matrimonial bar into an e-file court and a virtual court. So now that things have opened up, we've modernized. However, at the beginning, again, there was only exigent circumstances. So what did that mean for our clients? So for our client that was going through a divorce, it meant that they couldn't run to a judge if there was a problem. It still allowed us to negotiate with the other side and work out settlement agreements and the like. We kind of the matrimonial bar, to an extent, had a gentleman's agreement that if we reached a settlement agreement, nothing would be changed, for example, in the agreement, and that when the courts opened, we would file that agreement as is. In some instances, for cases that had not even been filed yet, we still were negotiating settlement agreements, and then you technically can't sign a settlement agreement until an action's commenced. So again, we would have an agreement between attorneys that once the courts opened, which they have at this point, we would file the lawsuit, we would file the judgment paperwork, we would file the settlement agreement. So we have been moving cases forward, although unable to file documents with the court. I would also.
So a quick question about that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Adam, please.
No, I would just note that a lot of times also you have to realize that in matrimonial actions, if it's somewhat amicable, you may not file even the lawsuit until you have a settlement agreement and you have all your documents in place. So again, things have been moving forward, even without the necessity of filing.
So I just want to make sure that everybody who's watching knows that you can use the Q&A tab below for asking questions if you'd like to. I know we haven't mentioned it since the top of the program, and we are with Hutcher Citron, who's obviously in divorce and family law. So with these actions starting to take place, do you expect, as the summer rolls on, to see an increase in actions because of the issues that have happened over the last few months? Do you expect to see things take longer because maybe the system is just getting back to speed, or still trying to make its way and figure out how to do everything? What do you see? What do you see coming on in terms of timing and volume over the next, I guess through the summer and maybe the rest of 2020?
Right. So again, I mean, if you can work out an agreement and stay out of court, I think that it can be done pretty expeditiously. I do believe that with the backlog that they've got now, that if it does become contentious, even though they are accepting applications and requests for preliminary conferences, which mean that you get assigned a judge and you go through the whole discovery and all of that, I do believe that to get a court date on a non-exigent matter will be months and months and months. So there will be a tremendous backlog, which will, to an extent, motivate people to be somewhat amicable, because if they're not, and they don't have the quick remedy of the court system, and people don't want to go through a 3-year divorce, as it's anxiety provoking, it's a very uncomfortable situation, and as contentious as it may be, people just personally do not want to go through a contentious divorce for so many years. I do think that we're going to see a tremendous amount of modification applications, meaning people have now reduced salaries, people have may have lost their jobs. So I do believe that those persons that may have already been divorced and have a support award or a support obligation are going to need to go to the court if they can't resolve it between the attorneys and seek a downward modification of those support orders. I believe that there is going to be a lot of relocation type cases. People think that relocation means moving state to state. That's not the case. It's maintaining the status quo. So for example, if both parents lived on the Upper West Side and then one wants to commute, one wants to move to Hoboken, again, that's still a different state, or even to Westchester County, which maybe it would be 25 minutes away. That's still another county. So they're going to have to make application to the court for that relocation. So that's another factor.
But that's only if that's not agreed to amongst the parties.
Correct.
Right?
So you always need to make a good faith effort to work it out between the parties before you seek court intervention.
Gotcha. Understood. And so, yeah, we were talking about it even within a borough, within a county, to make it such that might be an issue. Might
Right.
require a court if you're not able to come to an amicable understanding.
Right. So even if if it used to take 20 minutes, for example, for the the child to travel, and now it takes an hour, and that's going to affect the access schedule. It's not fair for a child to have to travel an hour to have 2 hours on a Tuesday and a Thursday evening to see the other parent. So you're going to have to change the access schedule. You're going to have to play with things to make it work.
So yeah, I mean, and it sounds like somebody who might want to fight that or do something about that really would, are they, having the best interest of the child in mind if that was the case, right? If they were really going to fight that and say, I still have to see, you still got to bring my child an hour and 2 hours, whatever, so I can see them on a weekday evening.
Exactly. So it's always
arrangement.
Right. To change the status quo or to change what's already been agreed to is always an uphill battle. And again, as I said, I don't think a New York judge would say that New York is unsafe as compared to Florida. It's also going to be hard for a New York City judge to say that New York City is unsafe as compared to Westchester County. So again, it's an uphill battle. Hopefully parties can work it out amongst themselves. But if not, it's going to be interesting to see how judges handle these matters.
So based on your kind of experience and the things we've talked about, are you and your colleagues expecting a lot of new cases?
We're expecting, again, a lot of modification cases. We're expecting a lot of relocation cases. We're expecting a significant amount of divorce cases because, again, you've got the stressors of what's going on. As I said, the number one used to be financial issues. So now you've got quarantine compiled with financial issues, compiled with being with a partner who you may not have had the best relationship or they're a fragile relationship for an extended period of time. So yes, I think that a lot of marriages are not going to make it through this. I also feel that a lot of people will take advantage of the situation in that if their incomes this year are less than in other years, they may say to themselves, you know what, now's a good year to get divorced because a judge is going to be looking at my financial situation this year and my support award will be based off my reduced income this year and not that of better years.
And that really makes it sound like people who have been, who would do that really had some deep-seated issues for some time with the relationship they're in.
Right. It's if you've been in an unhappy relationship, this is a perfect time to cut the cord.
So you mentioned some of the things that might happen as a result of the financial uncertainties of this crisis. You mentioned changes in awards or changes in support structures, whether it be spousal, I hate to use the word alimony, but whatever that is, and obviously child support as well. Are there any other financial issues relating to family law or divorce that might come up and might be managed differently now as a result of this?
Well, I do believe that it used to be that in agreements, unforeseen change of circumstances were not addressed. I believe that having gone through this pandemic and the epitome of an unforeseen circumstance, I believe attorneys will be more cognizant to include in their agreements what were to happen if this or something similar were to happen again. Meaning if there was a reduction in income due to another pandemic or a natural disaster, I think that clients are now going to want the comfort of that contingency built into their agreement, because we're getting calls saying, I'm petrified, I have a court order, I want to live up to it, but I simply cannot. My salary has been reduced 50%, or I've lost my job. I can't go to a court. I can't ask permission not to pay. I don't want to be held in contempt. I don't want to be thrown in jail. So you have a lot of people that are petrified of not being able to live up to their court obligations. As a result, I do think that attorneys will be more attentive to that issue rather than just kicking the can and saying, if there's an unforeseen change of circumstance, you can go back to court and seek a modification. Because as we saw here, the courts closed down and that was not possible.
Now, you also mentioned that I think in a prior conversation, you mentioned something else about there basically putting new clauses in to divorce agreements about those unforeseen circumstances. And I'm feeling like I'm recalling something else, but I can't bring it to bear right now. So tell me about kind of what legal language might go in. And then if I recall, I'll ask that question as well. And again, we are still taking questions for the audience. Please use the Q&A tab if you have questions for Adam. Go ahead.
Right. So the agreement should incorporate measures in the event of an unforeseen change of circumstance. Again, this is a change of circumstance that is unforeseen and not caused by the malfeasances of that party. So, for example, you could build in that in such an instance where because of a natural disaster or a pandemic or a terrorist act where courts have closed down and and you can't see court intervention, that if salaries are reduced, the parties will agree to prorate, for example, the support payments, with the potential for arrearages in the event that the salary is raised or restored, or the money is paid back to the employee. So again, there's definitely ways to contract that issue that protects both parties and gives a sense of comfort to the payor spouse as well as the payee spouse.
Fair enough. So I guess here's always the hard question now that, maybe we're at a time where people can see an opportunity if this was just too much on the relationship. If someone did want to begin a divorce action, what are the steps they should take to prepare themselves to move forward?
Okay. Well, obviously they should reach out to an attorney. You can file new divorce actions now. We've filed several in the last few weeks. So the courts, while there is a couple-day delay, they are accepting new actions. Obviously, it's unclear how courts will come out on the issue of, do they just look at this reduced salary this year, or do they average the next couple of years hoping for a rebound? So there's a lot of unknowns. However, you can commence a divorce at the present.
What other, we are in a group that deals with divorce and all aspects of a divorce. But what other actions should somebody take other than just filing for divorce, right? What are the other actions people should look at doing in preparation? Isn't it going to an attorney the first thing they should do?
They should absolutely go to an attorney. An attorney is not just, a legal counselor, but to an extent, a therapist. We can strategize and discuss the best and most amicable way about approaching your spouse with respect to a divorce. I'm not an advocate of just filing an action and having a process server serve the other spouse. I want to work it out reasonably. I want to work it out amicably, expeditiously. I'm sympathetic that this is probably one of the worst experiences both parties are going through. I am very sympathetic to the children going through divorce, and I don't want to hurt either party. I want the parties to come out of this as best as possible. So again, I think it's a good idea that if you are contemplating it, before you even speak to your spouse, and you're not going behind that person's back by speaking to an attorney, you're A, being educated, and B, learning the best way to go about doing it, which to an extent will help the situation, cause less animosity between the parties by going to an expert and getting advice before you make a rash decision and an uneducated decision.
So what are some of the other aspects that people need to look at in terms of financials or things they need to prepare? So we've talked, obviously from the financial aspect, I would expect that people would want to understand their financials, not only their cash flow, but also the other assets that they have. Obviously I'm coming from my realm and my domain. For you who's involved in this every day, what aside from the emotional and emotional aspects of it, what are the other areas that somebody should be prepared to deal with either before, during, or after an action?
Okay, so again, that's why it's also important to go to an attorney and discuss, what am I entitled to? What's the picture going to look like if I get divorced? Before you make that decision, you should make an informed decision from a financial basis and not just an emotional basis. And again, I deal with a lot of clients that have never paid the bills. They've never really reviewed the tax returns. They don't know what accounts there are. That'll all be fleshed out, whether between attorneys or in the litigation. So all of the financials will come to light, but a party should understand the financial repercussions of what a divorce entails and what they're entitled to. which again, even if they go to a mediator, we recommend that they still have counsel so that they can gain that knowledge of what they are entitled to. So again, I mean, the financials will flush out, but before anyone makes a decision, they should at least know, potentially even without having all the facts, what they're entitled to.
All right. So again, last chance for people who have questions to ask them using the Q&A tab. We haven't had any yet, and that's okay. Means Adam and I have done a great job at explaining everything to you. So it's all well and good. So Adam, how can people contact you?
Okay, you can contact me via email at adc@dhclegal.com. Again, that's adc@dhclegal.com. Or by checking out our website, our firm's website at dhclegal.com. You can find all of my information under my attorney profile. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have after listening to this and having some time to digest it. Always happy to talk and answer and help out as best I can.
So we just have one, thank you for that, but we do have one more question from the audience that did pile in. Other than an attorney, what other experts should someone consult during divorce?
Well, the thing is, and sorry to say this, Russ, but a financial planner has a fiduciary obligation to both parties. So if you're contemplating a divorce, I wouldn't necessarily go to your financial planner and ask, because again, he has a fiduciary duty if the husband asks or the wife asks to let that person know. So again, I think the best person to speak to is an attorney, a matrimonial attorney. Matrimonial attorneys are well versed in the financial aspects, the custody aspects, pretty much all the aspects of a divorce. So again, while some people may say, "Oh, I don't want to go to an attorney. I don't want to make this into a lawsuit and a litigious event," that's not. Well, at least in my view, that's not, and I feel a lot of family lawyers are like this. That's a last resort. Courts are a last resort. Litigation is a last resort. We want to, call up the other attorney on the other end and work it out amicably and expeditiously. So again, I think the best thing to do is speak with an attorney and take it from there.
And kind of let them quarterback the process, right?
Exactly. We deal with financial analysts, with financial planners. We deal with insurance brokers, trust issues. We quarterback the entire show and make sure that client is all their needs are met, whether it be future needs or determining what assets are. We deal with all different professionals.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. And again, Adam's given you his information. You can just scroll back for a few seconds or a minute or so and get that. And I want to thank myself. I want to myself thank Adam Citron for joining us today on Discuss with Russ. You can reach me, Russell Rivera, at russell.rivera@voicewealth.com. That's russell.rivera@voicewealth.com. Or you can call us at 646-630-0980. For those of you watching live today, we will be sending a follow-up email with the link to the recording, which can also be found at www.voicewealth.com/blog. It takes about a week to get posted. For those of you, or you can also view all of our videos, our Instablog series, our financial planning series, and the Discuss with Russ series on the Voice Wealth Management YouTube channel. Next week on Wednesday, June 17th at 2 p.m., we'll have Ross Karp of 3P Insurance to discuss how the insurance market has changed as a result of the last several months. If you'd like to register for that webinar, you can reach out to me again at russell.rivera@voicewealth.com or check your email inbox for registration emails. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.